Hey guys and girls, it's Blackjack with 396 Guitars. We have a Stratocaster shaped object on the bench. Don't get judgy when you see it. I have worked on this guitar before. In fact, I did sort of a rebuild type of thing on it. It needs a lot more work, but this instrument actually plays really well for what it is. And we're going to get to work on it. We have a couple of complaints from the customer. It's here to get restrung, and we have a crackly electronic thing going on. So let's get to work. You will notice vintage 1962. I recently had a birthday, and I was born in 1962, which makes me vintage, and I'm a little relic as well. So let's talk about the Silvertone Stratocaster shaped object. I have already taken the time to remove the back cover, and you'll notice, like I said, I worked on this guitar before. It's got 5 springs in it, and I'll tell you why. Because it has 12s on it, and he uses the trim. So the first thing that I want to do after not having this guitar on my bench for, well, I don't know, 10 months ago or whatever, it was a long time ago. I want to check the tuning, I want to check all the measurements, and I want to see if it stays in tune. And it seems like it is. Let's see where it's at. A little flat. You know, everything was flat exactly the same amount. You may not have played it in a while, plus it was in and out of the case and in the car for the drive up here. 12s are like damn. They're very heavy strings. Without tuning it, I played it and plugged it in and played it, and it sounded like it was in tune. But every string was exactly the same amount flat, which means it's probably been sitting around for a while. Seems to be wanting to go a little flat, which means it hasn't been played in a while, probably. I think maybe we got too much roulette. There we go. Now here's something clicking up here, which means the string tree is probably grabbing. It's staying in tune. For a cheap guitar with a lot of tension on it, always a G string. Rotten kid in class. Yep. Yeah. You got just the right amount of lift off the body. Everything goes back into tune. I can tell he doesn't play it as much. Sometimes the G. Now my rule of thumb is always go flat and tune up to pitch. But when you're talking about a trim system, sometimes you want to go down to pitch. Because it's going to tend, if something isn't right, it's going to tend to stay sharp. Which this one is not doing. 12s with 5 springs and a trim system, jacking on a cheap neck. The only thing I told him the last time I was working on this guitar, and I did a lot of work on this, I think I did like 3 videos on this. I told him, I said, invest in a good roasted maple, Canadian roasted maple neck and put it on this body with this setup, and it'll be a lot more stable. In fact, I gave him when I took this guitar, I gave him my Frankencaster, which is the same kind of thing. It's a very lightweight body. It's not a cheap body like this, although I think the body is much better than the neck. But it's got a really nice Canadian roasted maple neck on it with a trim system. And I have 5 springs on that one, and it's only got 10s on it. This one's got 12s. And we're gonna get into it. The complaint is electronical problems, which we're going to dive into. I'm going to take off the trim because I just don't need it in my way. Get the trim bar out of the way. And I want to check out all the pickups. The selector, he said, is cranky and making some crackling noise, and same thing with the pots. Now, it could be that they're just dirty, but my guess is, being that this is a Silvertone, I don't know if you can read that, the electronics in it are not going to be great. They're probably going to be little tiny pots about the size of a pencil eraser, and I know this switch, being that it's all, I can feel that it doesn't, I mean, when I click it, it doesn't feel right. I totally recommended to him to put one of these in there, which is a regular Fender replacement 5-way switch. But let's see what kind of noise it's making. I don't know. I mean, I really don't know, but you got to check it out. I know it's going to need some rewiring, but thing stays in fucking tune. Sorry, didn't mean to use the F word. Yeah, getting a lot of noise. And he said in the first position, when he was strumming, he was, and I don't know if the camera mic is picking up on that, but a lot of noise. But when you go to the second position, A lot of noise going on there. Let's just see if they're doing what they're supposed to. That should be just that one. This one should be these two. That should be just the middle. And that should be both of these. And that should be just this one. Yep. They're doing what they're supposed to, but I'm getting a lot of wonky noise. I'm going to say that probably when I get the strings off and flip this thing over, there's not going to be any shielding. There's not going to be any ground wire to the body. Probably a ground wire to the claw, which there is, but it's a really small, tiny wire. A lot of noise coming from this thing, and that's going to be also the pots. He says he had crackling in some of the pots, but I don't hear that. I'm going to say that probably he's going to have some cheap-ass pots in here, and this switch, being that like every other one, it is making a hum of 60 megahertz, whatever you want to call it, hum. And that is usually on these little buggers, when you wire them in, there's supposed to be a jumper wire that goes from the center lug to the two center lugs are supposed to be jumped. And my guess is, first of all, it's not going to be a rotary switch like the Fender one is. It's going to be one of those cheap offshore with a little circuit board in it, and those things are failure waiting to happen with a capital F. So let's unplug the amp. I'm going to de-string it. I do not have strings for it here today, but it doesn't matter, because once I open this thing up, we're going to have to own what's going on in there. Stand by. So real quick, before we de-string it and get into the meat of what's going on down in here, I wanted to check the neck relief. Remember, cheap neck. Nope, it's right where I left it. So not so bad, cheap neck, but hey, it's holding. It's holding right where I left it. That's surprising. So I'm going to de-string it and get this out, and we'll be right back. So we took the strings off. Oh, by the way, honking. 12s are honking strings. You've heard of 9s and 10s. Yeah, 12s are just honking strings. But that's the way this guitar was set up, and it played really well and it held tune, but damn. Be ever so careful when you're doing this. Don't just get down in there and start prying on it. I can already tell these are cheap pots. Just ever so slightly. Up, up, up. Once you do that all the way around, it should pop right off, which it did. Let's pull these screws out. What the hell? Huh. All right. I gotta say, for a cheap guitar, I think this body is actually a hardwood. And once you do this, you own it. Once you do this, you own it. So we got all kinds of wrong colored wires. Oh yeah, little tiny nondescript pots. The offshore, oh yeah, it's had moisture in it. That's probably why it's making noise. Well, it didn't do it with me. No ground to the body. It goes around to the claw. These little, I call these chiclet pots. They're literally, they're only about the size of the head on that screwdriver. They're tiny little things. In fact, the screwdriver head's bigger, and that's the smallest screwdriver that I have. So I am going to, and I don't know why they have it wired up like this. They've got two caps on it, two capacitors. The solder job looks like it was done right, but this is not how I would wire up a Strat. 1, 2, 3, wrong. I wouldn't do that. I don't see that where the jumper wire is. Yeah, this thing is wired up wrong. And they have all three of the grounds just jumbled together to go to one of those tiny little pots. There's a big, is it an S? Mind my head. There's some sort of logo on the pots, but these pots are junk. And the switch is junk. Now, the pickups, I'm sure, are usable. But if we replace the 5-way switch with a good Fender one, and this is a made in Mexico, that's a replacement part. And I use Mexican parts on a lot of my guitars. My own basses and customer guitars, and I've never had. I have a Mexican neck on one of my basses. I love it. Very stable. I'm going to recommend to the customer that we replace the switch. The switch is $7 or $8. They're not expensive, and the upgrade is humongous. And I'm going to say, look, man, invest another $50. Let's get a good set of $50-$60. Let's get a good set of 250K pots and put them in there. Shield the cavity, shield this, and do this right, because there's a lot of wonky, weird noise coming out of it that I just ain't digging on. I mean, just get an idea of how tiny those pots are. Stop. But before he's done, I'm going to get him to get a new neck. We can even reuse probably some of these tuners. Get a new neck. Get this stuff changed out. Yeah. I just don't even want to mess. I mean, I could put just the switch in and leave these pots. They're working. But I'm going to have to rewire it differently because they've got two capacitors, and I don't know why, because it doesn't need them. There's some different way that they've wired this. There's no jumper wire over here. There's a ground coming off of this nondescript 5-way switch. It looks like the Asian offshore company that built this took Leo Fender's perfect design and said, oh no, we're going to screw around with that, and this is what we're going to do. And that's why it's going and making all kinds of noise. They put a better paint job on it than they did putting electronics in it. So we're gonna call that part 1 on the Stratocaster shaped object. My rant is done. I have found other instruments like this. I worked on this guitar before. He loves it. It plays good, he says, but it's making a lot of electronic noise, and this is where it led us. So if you're going to open it up and put one good component, put them all and wire it correctly. Let's Blackjack with 396 guitars. We'll talk soon. Remember, if you dig what I'm doing, like and subscribe. We'll have part 2 on this thing coming up soon.